There was a very notable omission from the front running in Melbourne, and that was Carlos Sainz. And Sainz had a really torrid weekend, partly from the team side not getting it right, and partly from Carlos then trying to make amends with a bit of overdriving. And we can see that now. First of all, qualifying. Now, Sainz and Leclerc were actually fairly evenly matched throughout the practice sessions and into qualifying, but into Q3, and Sainz has a problem. First of all, the first flying lap of Q3, he's unlucky. As he comes through out of the final corner, the lights go red for Fernando Alonso's crash behind, just seconds before he can cross the line, so he cannot get a time on the board. The lap that he's just done, it was a couple of tenths off Leclerc's time that was provisional fastest, but it just was scrapped from the archives basically. It doesn't count for anything, so he's still last in Q3. That meant there's a lot more pressure on the final lap, and Sainz had another problem on the final run as well. He couldn't fire up the car. Ferrari, the team couldn't fire up the car. Carlos and Charles were trying to go out and do a prep lap and then a fast lap because the tyres, getting them in to the right window was crucial on Saturday on the soft tyres. Leclerc managed to do that, but because Sainz didn't manage to have his car fired up in time, he could only go straight out and try a fast lap, and that left him with tyres that were a little cooler than he would otherwise have liked for a flying lap, and he ended up having quite a scrappy lap, including a huge moment where he nearly put it in the wall at turn 10 and ended up in 9th place.
Disaster.
So far from ideal Q3 for Carlos Sainz. Certainly had the pace, even the first lap of Q3 would have been the pace for the top 4. That's where the Ferrari car should at the very least have been, but instead he started 9th. But the problems for Sainz didn't end there. He still had gremlins as he came to the grid, and the Ferrari team changed the steering wheel at the last minute because again they couldn't fire up the car properly. We're about to go for the green flag. You can see all the mechanics, they've just pulled to the side of the track here, and it's time to do a practice start basically from the dummy grid. The green flag waves, and Carlos with his new steering wheel at the last minute on is going to do a practice start. So what we're looking at from a driver's point of view here, he's in first gear, and you want to see those shift lights, those 5 lights there. You want to see them all illuminated. That means you've got your pre-start revs bang on, and that's what everything is dialed in for. And Sainz has done that here. So he's right in the decent window, drops the clutch, but you can see all the lights come back on. That's because he's got anti-stall. So at this moment, he's dropped the clutch, but all those lights are going haywire, and that means he's in anti-stall. So he needs to re-pick the clutch and go again. So it's a really scruffy one. Now, there's an issue here for Sainz. He's got a new steering wheel. The clutch bite point is, I think, in a different place compared to what he was hoping for. There's no plateau in the middle where normally you're aiming to drop it to around the middle of the paddle, and that's going to be your sweet bite point for a perfectly controlled start. Sainz hasn't found that, so he's dropped the clutch too deep, and that meant he's just bogged it straight into an anti-stall. Problem is that you can't speak to the team on the formation lap. We saw a couple of years ago when Haas were penalised in Budapest for team communication on the formation lap. You can't do it. So there's no way of Carlos now trying to work out what's gone wrong. He just needs to kind of guess once again. This is a real problem for him. He's starting still in the top 10 on his hard tyres. And now we come round to the main grid. Again, his procedure is good. The lights are all in the right place as he's got the 5 lights on ready to go. But again, he drops it, and again, the anti-stall lights come on. So he's basically got to re-pick the clutch, and it's a horrible start for him on his hard tyres as well, compared to all these midfielders on the mediums. That's not going to help him into turn 1 and on these early corners, and it just means that Sainz already was in a bit of a midfield scrap. But now he's towards the back end of the midfield, and he's got a lot of work to do in what was the fastest car by a margin, really, in Melbourne, certainly in race trim. But Carlos now has got issues because he's down behind a lot of the midfielders. He knows that there's still a podium on the cards, but he needs to clear them quickly. But actually, this is now where the team have had some issues, but now the driver makes some mistakes as well. It was a bit of a perfect storm for Ferrari and Sainz this weekend. Ferrari on Sainz's car, I should say. The other one, the perfect dream. So Sainz now, lap 1. And you've got Valtteri Bottas and Yuki Tsunoda fighting it out. This is a sweet move from Bottas around the outside of turn 10, almost stacks it on the exit. And now Sainz looks to try and pass Tsunoda, but this is where he's just a little bit impatient. Bottas has just put actually a really dreamy move on Tsunoda. But from here, it's going to be really tricky for Carlos to go around the outside of Yuki into turn 11 here. He's not ahead in the braking zone. The midfielders, they fight really, really hard, particularly someone like Tsunoda. He's an aggressive racer. Even if he's against a Ferrari right now, it's a chance for him to get his elbows out and really show what he can do. So Sainz tries to go in deep, but Tsunoda just sort of runs with him here, and Sainz is in too hot and runs very wide, and he loses another place now to Mick Schumacher. So it's just a little bit of impatience, understandable because he's got a car that should be at the front and he's down way outside the top 10, but it costs him another place here to Schumacher, who sweeps through. And then the next lap, there's even more impatience for Carlos. Again, the Ferrari car is way quicker than the Haas. It's quicker than the AlphaTauri. It should be towards the front. And Carlos knows it, and he's got the pace to do something about it, but he just overcooks it. Now, remember, he's on the hard tyre. Full tank of fuel at the start of the race. Schumacher defends into turn 9. No DRS here. No DRS even available at any point because it's so early in the race. And Carlos just zooms around the outside, but he's so deep on the brakes here. He's caught himself out by trying to just sweep it around the outside of Mick in the slipstream from the car ahead, and he's just in so hot that he just can't keep control over the grass, and now he's pointing the wrong way, needs to try and get it turned slightly to the right, but he's just out of control, and that is the end of Carlos Sainz's Grand Prix, really before it's got going.
I'm in a gravel. What can I do? Tell them to push me if they can.
The long game there, I'm sure he would have been ruining, not just being a little bit more patient and waiting for the race to come to him, because he had the pace to do it. But it was just a difficult weekend from a reliability point of view, and then from the driving side, just to try and make up for that. And we can see that here really with how deep he was on the brakes, trying to make that move on Schumacher. The key part we're looking at is here. This is right at the end then of the straight into turn 9 when Sainz is about to drop it. And look, Sainz is in the red, on the hard tyres, with a big slipstream, trying to pass Mick Schumacher. The blue line is Charles Leclerc, on the medium tyres, in clear air at the front. And Sainz actually goes in deeper, with more dirty air than Leclerc, and he's on the hard tyre to match. He's never going to make this corner. He's really overcooked it, and that is why he has his spin. It's really tough on Carlos. He's now 38 points behind his teammate and championship leader, Charles Leclerc. He doesn't really deserve to be that far behind. So many things have just gone against him. And it does seem like he's morphing into the number 2 driver at Ferrari. It could have been a little bit different. I don't think the performance of the two drivers has been as stark as the reality is. In fact, in the first 2 races, it was Carlos that was on provisional pole halfway through Q3, and he just couldn't quite put it together at the end. Again, this race in Melbourne is the big hit for his championship, because Leclerc won, took 26 points on him. But again, a lot of things outside of his control. The red flag, the car issues that he had, but then just not probably the reaction that he needed in trying to get those places back, and it leaves him with a lot of work to do. He has to hit back soon, otherwise the team is probably going to start galvanising behind Leclerc, because they've got a cracking chance to win this championship. That was a look into the woes of Carlos Sainz through the Australian Grand Prix, but there was plenty of action around that. Towards the front, the Mercedes and the Red Bulls fighting once again, and further back, drama for Aston Martin, celebrations for Williams. Check it out on F1 TV.